What's going on, everybody? Patrick from Obscure Reference here with another review. This time for, if you couldn't guess by the background or the title of this video, it's X-Men 97. It's the finale's out. All 10 episodes of the first season are out, and I have been dying to talk about it. Fortunately, if you'll recall, we did talk about the first two episodes when they dropped. It was me and my brother Chris. We both grew up loving X-Men. He was not able to make it today for this review, which is totally cool. Everyone's got stuff going on, but I need to talk about it. I need to vent. I need an outlet for this. So here I am doing a solo review. So before we get into any of that, do that usual YouTube stuff. Leave a like, leave a subscribe, comment down in the video what's your favorite part about this, who's your favorite X-Man, all that good stuff really helps us in the algorithm. So that being said, let's jump right into this. I'm going to start with my spoiler-free thoughts. I'm going to just do surface level stuff for this animated Disney Plus original series. Right off the bat, I think it's obvious the show's really good. If you've watched it, you know what I'm talking about. So if you haven't watched it and you consider yourself a fan of the X-Men, do it. This is easily, hands down, without a doubt, not only one of the best X-Men things I've ever watched, it's one of the best Marvel productions probably since Endgame, if not just the original Iron Man movie. I don't know. Like, this is a really good show. I think if you're an X Men fan, it's a no brainer. Go watch this. You don't really need to watch the original 97 or 92 show all the way through. You can watch like a recap or something on YouTube. I don't know. But they also give you plenty to latch onto as a reference point in the show. Like, they reference, obviously, Jean in the original show was the Dark became the Phoenix and then the Dark Phoenix, and they reference that here and there. But it's never like, oh, you need to know who all these people are to do all this. No, they fill you in pretty quickly on who these different characters are and where they lie and stuff. Yeah, with one exception, and I'll get to that in a second, because I think it applies to people who watched the original show as well, and I don't want to get too spoilery right off the bat. But and it's not even that much of a spoiler. It's we'll get to it. So yeah, if you like that stuff, cool. If you grew up in the '90s and you watched any of the animated Marvel shows, I think this one's also a no-brainer. Obviously, you probably watched the original X-Men show, but you probably also watched the original Spider-Man show or the animated Captain America. Or, sorry, he didn't have his own show. He did show up in the X-Men though, but he did also show up in the animated Spider-Man show. And I don't know if he showed up in the animated Iron Man show, but if you watch that, you'll probably like this too. This is that world without a question. There's no doubt. This is that '90s animated shared universe that those old shows shared. So I think that's really cool. And yeah. So if you're a fan of those, if you're a fan of the larger Marvel universe, I think this is what a good animated Marvel Studios joint can look like. So I think it works if on both fronts. If you're a Marvel fan or an X-Men fan, chances are you're both if you're one of them. So definitely take a peek at this. And if you're not any of those, I honestly I feel like I could share this with anyone, and if they watch the first two episodes, they're probably in. If of course they're in for all the melodrama, the campiness, the goofiness that comes with the territory of any good X-Men story, which I love. I just like the X-Men and what they stand for. I also love all the goofiness and the camp that comes with it. Like, is it weird that we have giant robots that are hunting down all these people? Sure. Is it weird that we're traveling through time at any given interval? Yeah. What about a space alien who runs an intergalactic TV station? Yeah, that's bizarre. That's weird as hell. But that's what I love about this stuff. And of course, all the melodrama, all the love triangles, and sometimes squares. Like, it's ridiculous how much melodrama there is in these shows, in this, with the X Men in particular. And I think the show really nails that. It's a really good adaptation of the comics while also changing things to fit in the narrative of the larger show and the story being told in this first season. Uh, I think that largely it works. There are some things that, just due to the medium of a Disney Plus original show, that you can't really tell all of certain storylines as they were in the comics, which is fine. Some of these don't really need to be fully fleshed out. but that is really just a nitpick, if anything. Uh, I will say too, the way that they are able to play with that, with your expectations, like someone like me who is familiar with the X Men, who knows various villains and different figures throughout the X Men world. It's fun to see them think they're like, when you think they're leading in one direction, and then they just hard turn. It's like, oh, I wasn't prepared for that. But then there are a lot of moments that you see coming, but it's done in a way that works, and that gets you excited and all hopped up. So, in that sense, I think it works very well. So yeah, ignore that quick transition there. So yeah, that's gonna be my surface level thoughts. I think it's a really good animated show if you can get into it. It's definitely, I wouldn't say it's for kids so much, as it is mostly for people that grew up with the original show. I think it carries a lot of that original spirit, but it is definitely more for adults in this day and age. It's rated TV 14, and I didn't know that. And there are certain episodes where it's like, oh, you earned that rating. So if you are watching this with kids, just be prepared to like explain things or comfort them or stuff, because it's not friendly. It's not. It's kind of dark. So yeah, I really can't say much more than that without going into spoilers. So that being said, I'm gonna jump into spoilers in three, two, one. Final chance. Get the heck out. Come back. We'll be here when you're done watching this. So yeah, this show rules. We didn't get a chance to talk about all the individual episodes, so I'm just gonna briefly work my way through them because I have thoughts on just about all of them. Um, so we talked about the first two episodes, and I was being coy when we were talking about the end of that second episode because of a certain appearance of a certain clone of a certain character, and I didn't think that the person that showed up at the X Mansion was the real Jean. I thought that was going to be Madeline Pryor because of how things play out in the comics. And this is what I'm talking about, where they're adapting the Inferno storyline, and it's completely, I won't say it's completely different. They do keep some of the same ideas from that original event, as far as Madeline Pryor goes, at least. But a lot of it's different. But I remember thinking as the episode goes on, well, because this was around the point too where the first issue of the X-Men 97 comic came out, and it explains that Bishop's stuck in their time, and they explain as much in this episode, that he's stuck in time and that Beast is working on fixing his time travel device. And it was around that point where I'm like, something's gonna happen to their baby, and they're gonna have to take it to the future, because that's how Cable becomes Cable. And sure enough, that's how this plays out. But we also get some really sick fighting scenes and sick action stuff between Madeline Pryor and Magneto in particular. Same with Cyclops, who's trying to do his best to calm down someone who is an exact copy of his wife. Um, and I really like the dynamic that pops up here between Jean, Cyclops, and Madeline Pryor. I think it's really interesting. It definitely doesn't play out like it does in the comics, because in the comics, Madeline Pryor kind of gets her psyche gets absorbed into Jean, so that's kind of their way of tying that off with a ribbon to say, oh, now they're one again, so you never have to worry about it ever again. Except, of course, she comes back because it's comics. Um, but this is also where we kind of lead into Storm on her quest to get her powers back. That's where she runs into Forge, and we'll touch on that in just a second. Because then we jump right into episode 4, which was a two-parter. This one I had a little bit of a rough time with. It's split into two pretty unevenly. It's I think there's more of a focus on the Jubilee stuff than there is Storm, which is kind of unfortunate because life death carries weight. If you've read any of the X-Men comics, you know exactly what those issues were about. Very introspective character studies on Storm and Forge in both Life Death Part 1 and 2 in the comics. Not so much the case here, which I mean, it is, but it isn't. It's not. It doesn't go as in depth as I would like it to. Um, but I think let's see. Yeah, okay. So we'll start with Motendo, which I think Mojo's a fun villain. I think his original appearances in the original show were a lot of fun. I think his new appearance here is interesting. I like how he's a little bit more slimmed down. I like seeing Spiral. I don't know if we saw Longshot, which was I mean, I think we did. He might have cameoed, but I honestly, I want him to join the team. I just really like Longshot. Um, but it's cool that he doesn't. Obviously, the show's great even without him. Um, this was more. I don't want to say it kind of felt like a clip show of like some of the greatest hits from the original X Men show, just based on the different levels that Jubilee and Roberto jump through in Mojo's crazy game. It's a fun little Easter egg filled uh, segment of an episode for people that watch the original show. Nothing great, nothing awful either. I think it's good building for Jubilee and Roberto to kind of convince you that there is something between them. While also, yeah, I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with that statement. So we'll then. Oh, also before I move on from that, I want to give a shout out to what was the character's name? Absissa, whoever the version of Jubilee was that kind of broke the code and was able to hack the Matrix, if you will. Voiced by Jubilee's original voice actress from the original show. And I thought that was a really cool bridging of the generations where they both teamed up to take down Mojo. I thought that was awesome. Um, so that's just a fun little Easter eggs for fans that watched the original show. But then Life Death Part 1 was honestly, I really can't remember much that happened from here. I think we get what do we have Storm find Forge in his lodge, and he admits that he helped invent the tech that created the power dampening collar, which again, how it worked out in the comics, but it was a little different. It wasn't collars. I think it was like a gun that shot Storm and stuff. But um, you kind of see them falling in love or beginning to, and then their relationship kind of snaps after he reveals that. And then we get the adversary, which, if you don't read the comics, probably came out of left field, and probably still don't understand. And I wish I could help you. The adversary is treated a little differently in the show than it is in the comics. It, do, it it's all in the Fall of the Mutants storyline. You can go read that on Marvel. What is that? Unlimited. Um, where Forge goes on a quest at the top of a mountain to take down the adversary, and so a lot of the stuff that Forge does with his Native American roots is rooted in the comics. But again, it probably came out of nowhere. So, oh wait, actually, it was a gun in the show. That's right. I'm stupid. Okay. Anyway, good stuff here. Good character building. Nothing fantastic. Again, episode 4, bit not a miss, but it was I don't know. It was okay, and I knew that because the next episode wasn't called Life Death Part 2, that we were gonna have to wait 2 more weeks. That cliffhanger was gonna be a real son of a gun, and little did I know that the next episode would leave me on an even bigger cliffhanger. Um, episode 5, Remember It, was the Genosha massacre that I was anticipating but never could have expected. Throughout this show, they kind of built up Genosha as a mutant haven. And in the back of my head, I'm thinking, well, surely they're not going to pull from Grant Morrison's New X Men, where Cassandra Nova massacres, pretty much genocides a bunch of mutants on that island. Surely we're not going to do that. And so the entire episode, seeing different characters that we haven't seen in a long time from the original show, like Banshee, like Moira. Um, I think we even see Emma and Sebastian Shaw before things go down. There's a lot of fun little cameos for people that watch the original show, or if you're just familiar with different X-Men characters. Like Glob Herman is here, and so is Pixie, but like you wouldn't know that if you watched the original show. Those are just from the comics. Unfortunately, they made it through this episode, because I don't know what I would have done if Glob Herman didn't survive episode 5. But this is also where we get the return of Nightcrawler. We get a faux, I'm going to call it the Quiet Council, which is from the Krakoan X-Men comics. It's a little different, but the same energy, because you have some former adversaries and some former allies, and including Madeline Pryor, which I thought would have been really cool to see how that unfolded. Unfortunately, not how it played out. And I really like the buildup of tension, because, like, in the back of my head, I know what happens in the comics. I know what's going on. I feel like we're building up to something, and then we get to the dance scene where Rogue and Magneto are dancing, and Gambit's like leaving and stuff, and it's like you can feel something's really wrong, and then Cable shows up, and that's when things really, that's when shit hits the fan. Because then he shows up, I'm like, oh no, I'm like, my voice is shaking because I was like, there's so much dread, and everything just kind of, everything that happens after that happens, and good gravy, seeing Banshee get vaporized like that, I was like, oh my heart, and seeing Nightcrawler almost get got, I'm like, oh no, there was just so much death in this episode that I wasn't expecting. And it's deaths that have stuck so far, aside from Magneto and going off that mid-credit scene, probably Gambit as well. Um, but seeing Magneto try to protect the Morlocks, including Leech, my boy, um, doing his darndest to keep that blast from getting to him, it's really harrowing this entire second half of this episode. And reading into one of the, I forget if he's a showrunner or not, but the creator of the show, Bo DeMeo, who I'll talk about him in a second, um, he was comparing it to the Pulse massacre that happened. Oh my gosh, it's been a while. I'm gonna blank on the year, 2017, late 2010s for sure, um, or even mid to late 2010s. I'm gonna blank on it, um, but he compared it to that because he would go to that club all the time, and so when that happened, he felt much like, I'm assuming how Rogue and some of the other mutants on Genosha felt after this episode. I think that right there is what tells me he gets X-Men. That right there tells me that the people working on this understand and know what the X-Men represent, and that's why it's a big part of why I think the show is well regarded by me as it is. I think they really hit the nail on the head with that one, truly. Um, but as far as Bodomeo goes, he got kicked off the project for a reason. I don't think we should be putting him on a pedestal. I'm just gonna throw that out there. Um, Clearly, the way he was fired, something really bad went down, and I don't know if we'll ever know why. So before we go and saying let's get him for the next season, get him for whatever the MCU version of the X-Men is, I don't know if that would be a great idea. Even if he does get X-Men, So keep that in mind. We're gonna, just kind of move past that because I'm probably gonna mention him a couple more times just because he's been given interesting tidbits on Twitter. So just bear that in mind. I don't want him back on the show, even if he truly understands X-Men. So yeah, episode 5, clearly far and away the strongest one here of the bunch. I don't know if any of the other episodes quite match the peak that was episode 5. I think I've watched the last like 3 minutes of this episode multiple times at this point. It's just heartbreaking. And watching Ro cry over Gambit's dead body at the end, it breaks me every time I watch it, even though I know it's coming. So shout out to that. Very, very powerful moment. Yeah, anyway. So episode 6, Life Death Part 2. Again, the Storm and Forge stuff it's good. Don't get me wrong. It's not my favorite part. Yeah, it's not my favorite part of this episode. I think it's good. Don't get me wrong. But it's really serving to help me. It does nail the internal development of Storm as she goes through this. Transformation of sorts. It nails that. I think it does a really good job. I won't say it nails it. It does a good job of hitting that arc for Storm as she gains confidence in herself and is able to use her powers again and be more comfortable with who she is as a mutant. And I think her costume change is a really good way to reflect that. I love her punk rock look. I'm a little upset it's not around after this point, but I honestly really love when she, has the black costume on with the yellow highlights and stuff. It's always great. And we've seen multiple variations of that throughout the years in comics, but it's probably one of my favorite looks of hers. Seeing her don the costume while flying through the air, and it was a beautiful sequence. But the other part of this episode really caught my attention, and I never expected it to, because Shi'ar stuff isn't necessarily my cup of tea. But that being said, I think it is really interesting getting a look into the Shi'ar politics. Um, Obviously, at the end of the original show, and they fill you in on all of this. while it would help to watch the original show, you don't necessarily need it. Um, but if you'll recall from the end of that show, Lilandra came and picked up Professor Xavier after he was poisoned at a mutant hearing, and he, obviously recovered. He had a suit that could help him walk and stuff. Um, and in the comics, I thought the storyline there takes a little bit of a different direction. The X Men had to intervene in the comics, but I'm kind of glad they didn't do that route here because I don't know if it would have worked. Um, but you get a lot of the inner lookings of their politics while also kind of splitting Xavier and Lilandra apart. We got to see the Imperial Guard. I always love to see Gladiator show up. Deathbird, she's cool. That's all I have to say about her, honestly. I mean, she's got a lot of pride, and it reflects here. I'm really. It's kind of refreshing to see her work with her sister Lilandra more, because in the original. I don't actually know if we see her do much in the original show. I don't remember if she worked for D'Ken in the original Phoenix Saga, but typically she's trying to dethrone her sister, and you see that done in a more subtle way here by trying to split or get in between Charles and Lilandra. Obviously, it doesn't necessarily work out, and we see Xavier get a strong mental image of the massacre on Genosha. Excuse me. So at that point, he decides to leave. What is their home planet? Honestly, I don't know. I'm blanking on it. Regardless, he decides to leave, and that's where we get to what is it? Well, we see him later, but he is on his way back at this point. Episode 7, Bright Eyes, was probably might be a top contender for my second favorite episode. We start with a funeral for Gambit's funeral, which awesome. Nightcrawler gives a really good speech here, whereas Rogue is on her own doing her thing. She's not even messing with the funeral, which is something that Jubilee points out. And there's a lot of really good character moments here. And this is really where the pieces fall into place to set up the 3-part finale. We also get a good Captain America cameo. Shout out to that. Looks like he did in the original X-Men show. I think you get a little bit of a flourish of his MCU theme, but maybe that's just me looking for something that's not there. Let's see. Yeah, and this is where we start getting tidbits of Operation Zero Tolerance, which is a storyline in the comics that they pull a lot of this from. We confront Sinister one more time, right? Yeah, no. That's right. That's right. They find Trask, and we think Rogue kills him, which awesome character moment. Really great for that, for her and where she's at this point. Um, and then then we find out he's a Prime Sentinel, and this is where we get the reveal of Bastion, who's a character I'm not super familiar with, but he's really good. He's well done here. I'm very interested. I want to learn more about him. That's really what the show did for me. And we got a lot of that in the 3-part finale, where, gosh, everything about this 3-part finale, Taunta's extinction, is just incredible. You get the launching of Operation Zero Tolerance in part 1. You get all the Prime Sentinels flying up, and everything is going to shit in the handbasket. Whereas you get, I'm blanking on her name. Valerie Cooper, who's with Bastion at the time, recovering. She apparently did not die in Genosha, and neither did Magneto, and she frees Magneto. And he has a really cool moment at the end where he just shuts off everything, all the power, everything around the world. It's awesome. This is that point where what do you say in episode 2? He's like, "Don't give me a reason to prove you wrong," and they gave him plenty of reason with Genosha, and so this is him taking it out on everyone, and it's badass. And this is also the point. This is a really good fever pitch moment where Magneto's doing this stuff. Everyone's like, "Oh, fuck, what do we do?" And then Charles lands on by the X Mansion. He's like, "To me, my X Men." Like, come on, it's awesome. And that's how the episode ends. And then obviously part 2 starts, and everyone's starting to regroup, including Storm, Jubilee, Roberto, and man, part Oh my gosh, I forgot episode 7. We also got Emma Frost doing her diamond stuff, her second mutation. So shout out to that. That was a really powerful moment too, when Cyclops thinks he found a telepath, thinking it was Madeline Pryor, but it was just Emma Frost. Anyway, part two of the finale was really good. A lot of really cool stuff for comic fans. We got the return of Charles Xavier, and we split the teams up to go in a blue team and a gold team. Hello, love that. Just like the comics in the '90s. And I really like the rifts that form between some of the X Men and Charles Xavier, namely Cyclops and Jean. I think there's a really well shot scene where it's Charles and the daylight behind him, and Cyclops and Jean on the other, with the wreckage of the X Mansion behind them. There's some really cool stuff here. I think it's also this episode where we see the original animated, or not the original, but the '90s Spider-Man from the cartoon, which is a cool little cameo. Didn't think we'd get more of that, but we do. Um, but we also get Rogue and Roberto joining Magneto as he heads to Asteroid M to watch the end of the the world from there, I guess. So we have two teams. One goes up against Magneto and his asteroid. The other goes up against Bastion at his base. Um, and yeah, honestly, everything with Cable here, with Cyclops and Jean, awesome. Really great stuff in all three of these episodes, particularly in episode one where they're being chased by all the Prime Sentinels. And, that car chase is awesome. And let's see here. The stuff at Bastion's base in part two of this kind of gets pushed to the wayside for me, because when I think of this episode, I think of the last like few moments of the on Asteroid M, where we get some really cool fight scenes. We get Rogue and Roberto fighting out Jubilee and Nightcrawler, and shout out to Nightcrawler joining the team. I completely glossed over that. Love that he's finally on the team. But then we get a badass moment for Wolverine, who's really kind of been sidelined this entire season, which honestly is fine. He's had his moments in the sun. Let's have the other X Men shine, so that when we do eventually get to the MCU stuff, we don't need to blow all our loads on Wolverine immediately. Um, but he gets a really cool moment where he sneaks up behind Magneto. First of all, Charles Xavier being pushed to control Magneto into bringing power back to the world, like that's fucked up on multiple levels. It's such a breach of what Xavier's all about. So I think that was a really strong moment for him as a character. But then you have Wolverine sneak up on Magneto and just stab him right through the guts, right? And he whispers to him, I've been in a lot of wars, bub. It's always the bravest that die first, or something like that. And then Magneto does it. He does the thing. He starts, he pushes him back, and it's like, well, yeah, of course. Why would you send Wolverine on a mission against Magneto? And then you just see it. He pulls the adamantium right out of him, and it's like, oh my god. First of all, straight out of the comics, the exact shot, everything. Second of all, I don't know, it was just cool. It was such a cliffhanger to leave the episode on. And with that, we jump into the next episode. Oh, also, before that, Cable using telepathy, awesome. Or telekinetics, rather, awesome. I haven't really seen him do that in a lot of stuff outside of the comics, so it's good to see that here. Um, but Cable, yeah, we see Jean. She revives with the power of the Phoenix. I'm not huge on that, honestly. I know the Phoenix comes back here and there in the comics. It's just always there, especially once you throw Rachel into the picture. Like, it is what it is. But I don't know. In the canon of this show, it feels a little like an ass pull, but it's there and then it's gone, so it's not a big deal. Um, then Bastion goes up into space. They do a real number on him. It's pretty cool. Um, but he also has some really powerful moments, like his whole backstory and how he could have been an X Man. There's a lot of fun what ifs that we could be doing here, and he's sure to throw that out where he's like, "Yeah, I could have been one of you guys, but where would that have gotten me?" So then he flies into space. He's doing all this stuff in space, whatever. Um, then that's how we get the teams together on Asteroid M, where they chase him in a Sentinel and they step on and they crash into the asteroid, I believe. And yeah, it's there's a lot of cool stuff. I'm all over the place at this point. I'm rambling. Um, but there's a really good line from Rogue where she flies in and socks him right in the face. She's like, "His name was Gambit. Remember it." Is a callback to episode 5, and that got me go, "Ooh, baby." Um, and we also get the Magneto protocols in effect here, shooting the meteor down, or yeah, the meteor down, asteroid rather, um, which leaves us in a fun spot for when the X Men do eventually return, because they were in good standing with the government. Now, not so much. So I think we'll see where that goes here. Um, cool. Okay. So yeah, with that, where they're able to the meteors kind of falling towards Earth. I keep calling it a meteor; it's an asteroid, but they're able to stop it, and then they kind of disappear, much like they do in Fall of the Mutants and the Uncanny X-Men part of that event. So a lot of people think they're dead, including Forge, and this is when Bishop Fine decides to come back, and it's like, really, right now, this is what you're gonna do. Um, but at least to a fun dynamic. He has a brief conversation with Forge, how they were buddies in the future. They just haven't gotten there yet. Which, if you've seen the original show, every time we see Bishop, chances are you're hearing a harmonica music cue. But he's also getting his mission and time traveling with the help of Forge. Um, so really cool stuff there. We also get a good moment between Cable and his parents, where they're kind of like now finally just meshing as a family, and then they're gone. Um, and we got a really touching moment between Morph and Wolverine, where Morph clearly cares about Wolverine more than I thought they did, and I don't know why I needed that to be explained to me, but yeah, it is romantic for Morph, and I think that's a really interesting plot line we can touch back on in season 2. I don't necessarily think Wolverine would go for it, but I also don't know for sure. Um, so I think that could be really interesting whether or not anything happens between them. I think that's a really interesting storyline that we could touch on. Um, but as for the rest of the X Men, like thing, we get a hard cut. We jump into the future. We see a board of Forge, with Forge of mutants that he might be recruiting. One of them is Shadowcat. Please, there's plenty of other mutants they could pull for a temporary X Men team to kind of fill in the gap while the main team is gone. So I'll be very curious to see what that looks like. But then we see a group of the X Men in the past, and as soon as I saw we were in an ancient Egyptian setting, I'm like, oh, we're doing Apocalypse. I had a feeling we would, just because I didn't think Gambit would stay dead. And the only way he could really come back was through becoming a Horseman of Death, which is how it happens in the comics, I'm sure. Um, so, and then they run into a young Ansabanur, which, if you don't know, is Apocalypse. So that's really cool. And then you see just like a futuristic dome in the desert, which was dope. And all this is kind of paired with the group in the future where they meet Mother Ascani, who is the one who mostly raises not Bishop Cable. Uh, and so I think that would be a fun little way for Jean and Cyclops to raise Nathan in a way that they would have if he didn't have to be taken to the future because of the techno organic virus. So I'll be very curious to see what that looks like. That is a bit of territory I'm a little unfamiliar with. I know there's a comic miniseries that kind of touches on that. I have not read it. Um, but that's where we leave things off, and I think that's a really good spot to end this first season. Um, and as far as how or why they're being moved through time, I honestly don't know. Could be a gambit by Apocalypse. It could be a way for him to get rid of the X Men while he does his thing in the present timeline. I don't know. He's clearly up to something. He was walking through the ashes of Genosha in that mid-credit scene, and it's very clear and obvious they're leading towards Gambit becoming the Horseman of Death. So I'll be really curious to see what that looks like and what that plays out to be. Because I haven't read those comics either. We're largely in territory I'm not familiar with as far as 90s X Men comics go. We might even be touching on 2000 stuff at this point. I'm not sure. But really, truly, and honestly, this was a really good finale. I've been talking for a half hour now on this. So I'm going to start winding down. Really, what else can be said about this show that hasn't been said by various other outlets? This show rules. If you haven't watched it and you listen to all that and you're still not convinced, I don't know what's wrong with you. I don't know what to do. Um, I really love the show. I'm a huge X Men fan, and this gave me everything I wanted and then some. So yeah, I really don't have much more to say on this other than where I think things are going. I think we're gonna do Ages of Apocalypse. I don't know what that looks like though. Um, I think we're gonna have an interim X-Men team, and I think that'll be a fun way to kind of bring in back in other characters that haven't necessarily had a starring role in either of these X-Men 97 or X-Men 92, like Shadowcat, like Magic, different characters like that. Even said Exodus on his board. I'm like, I don't know if Exodus is a good guy. I don't know enough about Exodus. He's kind of an obscure character before Krakoa happens. But anyway, that's probably gonna be where I wrap this review up. I two thumbs up. I'm gonna give this like a 9, maybe a strong 9.5 out of 10. Like this is as good as X-Men could be, probably. I'm not honestly. I'm not even gonna say that. This is the best X-Men we've gotten. Period. As far as outside of the comics go. So yeah, go watch the show if you haven't. Watch it again if you have. We're getting to season 2, I think, in a year. I have to double check that. I'm not sure, but I think they're even doubling down. They've already greenlit a third season. Could be wrong on that though. Let me know in the comments. But if you liked what I had to say here, like I said, leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe to our channel, hit that bell so you know when we drop other reviews, other trailer reactions, or go live. And yeah, because we do all that stuff. We stream Mondays and Fridays, usually gameplays. Might be branching out a little bit in the near future. We'll see. Um, but yeah, we do trailer reactions, movie reviews, TV show reviews like this, and we just have fun on here. So if you like that, if you like having fun, do all that stuff I just said. Follow us on our socials. I'm Patrick. This has been Obscure Reference. You just heard about the X-Men 97 show, and I want to hear from you. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and until the next video, I'll see you later.